Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Stephen A. Williams, president and founder of the creditrepairshop.com. I wanted to make this video to go over the debt collectors' new rules that they must abide by from the Cfpb, Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. These are going to go in action on the 29th of January 2022. Some of the stuff is standard, but there's some updates that have been made, and it will help you if you have debt collectors coming after you. There are certain things that they have to prove that they did not have to prove before they can place anything on your credit reports. So first, let's look at this line right here where we got the consumer communications. It says proposed definition generally restates the FDCP's definition of consumer for purposes of certain communication provisions, but interprets the term to include a confirmed successor in interest and the personal representative of a deceased consumer's estate. So if some people say, I don't want to leave nothing for my relatives when I die, I'm going to spend all my money, do all this and that. Well, a lot of people leave debt for their families when they die, and your estate could end up paying your debts. All right, so let's go here for debt. The purposes, right here, it has debt. The proposed definition generally relates to the FDCPA, Fair Debt Collection Practices Act definition of debt, with only minor wording and organizational changes for clarity. And then below there, consumer financial product or service debt. Certain parts of the proposal apply only when a debt collector covered by the FDCPA is collecting debt related to a consumer financial product or service as defined in the Dodd-Frank Act. You can look that up. It has the codes right there, the sections right there. All right, so here's one of the most important parts here: electronic communications generally. The proposal would identify safe harbor procedures for debt collectors who unintentionally communicate with an unauthorized third party about a consumer's debt when trying to communicate with the consumer by email or text. That is very, very important, because they're saying, hey, it was a mistake. How do you know it's a mistake? Remember when they used to call people a lot, and they would say, hey, I'm trying to look for John. Is John there, or have you talked with John? And then if you ask them the right question, they'll be like, well, this is a debt collector trying to catch up with them. Well, they're about to allow people to do that, or debt collectors to do that now, with email or text messages. Like, say for instance, maybe you changed your phone because you're, whatever, for whatever reason. They're going to be able to text that old phone, and if they mistakenly disclose your information to that individual that they're trying to collect on a debt, and that was the last number that they had, they're going to have an exemption for that mistake. They're going to also have an exemption for the mistake of an email, but maybe they'll also have an exemption for the mistake of typing in your email incorrectly. Now, they do say that, and this is the same way that you've always had it. When you had debt collectors calling you, you can always opt out of them or cease and desist from having a debt collector call you by phone. They do have a right to communicate with you by mail. You will have that right also to unsubscribe from any further communications by email from a debt collector. You will have that option. Okay, moving on down, communication media restrictions. Now, the proposal would prohibit a debt collector from communicating or attempting to communicate with a consumer through a medium of communication that the consumer has requested the debt collector not use, such as a specific telephone number or email address. Now, time and place, they've always had the time and place in place for when debt collectors can communicate with you. Use of workplace emails. Now, unless an exception applies, what is that exception? We're going to have to go in there and look at that. The proposal would prohibit a debt collector from contacting a consumer using an email address that the debt collector knows or should know is provided by the consumer's employer. For example, if a debt collector knows that the consumer works at Example Mortgage Company and the email address is john@examplemortgagecompany.com, or they got the initials there, the debt collector knows or should know the email address is provided by the consumer's employer. The reason why they don't want them communicating that way is because, number one, as your employer, they can get all of your emails, and some companies, no matter what you think, your emails are being monitored by an IT person in your company. Social media platforms. The proposal would prohibit debt collectors from contacting consumers through social media platforms except through a private message function. That means that they can't just go onto your page and say, hey, this is so-and-so debt collection company, and we're trying to contact you about a debt. They can't put it on your page, but they can direct message you from your page, or become a friend of yours, ask to become a friend. This is going to be crazy when this is all said and done and it's in full steam. You're going to be friends with a lot of debt collection representatives, and they're going to be DMing you through there. Don't be surprised for the guys. They're going to have a nice looking girl wanting to a picture of a nice looking girl wanting to be your friend, and for the girls vice versa, and for after they look at your page and maybe they look at your persuasion, have someone send. This is also being done by phone. One thing that I had noticed with my clients that are of Arab descent or Indian, one of the major credit card companies, I'm not going to say which one because I don't want to get the video flagged, but one of the major credit card companies that make you pay the bill at the end of the month, so you know what credit card company that is, they would actually have someone that is from their culture call them, because they're trying to put a certain amount of pressure on there. In their countries, having debt, not paying your debt, it has a certain not stipulation, it has a certain you're looked at a certain way. The word won't come to my mind right now. Stigma. They're trying to put that stigma on you, and they will use people from their that are the same ethnicity as they are, and try to put pressure on them. These are actual debt collection companies that are used by that company. They will do that. And they do it for, regular Americans too. That's why you always have, debt collectors saying, hey, you're a deadbeat or this and that. We don't like being called deadbeats. All right, limited content message. The proposal would define and provide example language for a limited content message. Debt collector could send by example voicemail or text. The content of the limited content message would not be considered a communication, and if heard or observed by a third party, it would not constitute as prohibited third party disclosure. Wow. So they can actually send a message, voicemail, to someone that they knows you, and it will not be considered constitute a prohibited third-party disclosure. Wow. Next, telephone call frequency limits. The proposal includes a limit on the number of telephone calls a debt collector may place to a consumer about a particular debt within a 7-day period, subject to certain exemptions. What are those exemptions? The proposal would prohibit a debt collector from calling a consumer about a particular debt more than 7 times in a 7-day period. But there's an exemption. The proposal would also prohibit a debt collector from engaging in more than one telephone conversation with the consumer about a particular debt within a 7-day period. But there's an exemption. A debt collector who stays within the proposed limits would not have engaged in repeated or continuous telephone calls or conversations with intent to harass, as provided by the FDCPA, Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. That means that even if you are in communications with someone about a debt, and you want to pay it, and they're just trying to call and say, hey, you said you're going to pay it this week. Hey, this day. And they call you next day and say, hey, you said you're going to pay it. And then they call you later on that day because they couldn't reach you on the phone and said, hey, are you going to still pay that debt? They're giving them an exemption. The exemption is going to be, trust me, and I'm going to make a video about the exemptions. Exemptions are going to be that you're in communication about paying that debt. Trust me. And all of this stuff is very hard to prove for someone who is not recording conversation, not recording and tracking calls, and someone who is trying to work, take care of family, and do things that's necessary to move through life day to day, to know that they're breaking the rules. Next one. Proposal would clarify how and whom a debt collector can communicate about a deceased consumer's debt, as well as how the required regarding validation process and dispute apply after a consumer passes away. Time-barred debt, there's that word, time-barred debt, or AKA debt that is past statute of limitation. The proposal would prohibit a debt collector from suing or threatening to sue on a debt that if the debt collector knows or should know that the applicable statute of limitation has expired. They did not talk about what would happen if someone reset the debt. That's what really kind of, shows that they were not really paying attention. They had a time bar debt, but they're not talking about what happens if the person accidentally resets the debt. Then it's not considered statute of limitations or time bar debt. Communication before credit reporting. The proposal, I like this one here. The proposal would prohibit a debt collector from reporting collection items to the consumer reporting agency unless the debt collector has already communicated with the consumer by, for example, sending a letter to the consumer. They've always had that. But I think what they're getting at with this one is that they can't do it simultaneously. And it's probably going to give it a little bit more time, but I'm going to research that. Transfers of debt. Unless an exception applies, the proposal would prohibit a debt collector from transferring a debt to another debt collector if the debt collector knows or should know that the debt has been paid or settled, the debt has been discharged in bankruptcy, or identity theft reported has been filed with respect to the debt. Had a lot of problems with that. We had a lot of problems with Santander transferring or selling debt to debt collectors, and that debt was included in the Santander multi-state settlement. Okay, key proposed disclosures, providing required disclosures electronically. The proposal generally would require a debt collector to provide required disclosures in a manner that is reasonably expected to provide actual notice in a form that the consumer may keep and access later. debt collector who provides the required disclosures electronically would need to comply with either the e-sign act or a set of alternative procedures. The proposal also includes requirements relating to the delivery and format of the required electronic disclosures for information on this aspect of the proposal. And it says, see the debt collection proposed rule. Electronic disclosures option flowchart on the Bureau's website. Basically what this is coming down to, because a lot of stuff is going to be electronically, you may say, hey, I did not receive that letter. They may choose not to send it in the mail. They're going to send it to you in email. You will sign saying that you did receive that information, and then they would have on record that you were disclosed the information pertaining to a debt, and then you would go through your debt validation process, and they might send you debt validation information through that electronic process. All right, moving down, validation notice. The proposal would require a debt collector to include in the validation notice certain information about the debt, including the account number, and we need the complete account number, and an itemization of the debt. And I've always talked about this. They cannot just send you one statement. They cannot just send you one statement saying that this all adds up to be this amount. Now, it might for a car, yeah, but for credit card, no, that is not going to work. For anything that is an account that you charged over a period of time, they cannot just send you one statement. Certain information about a consumer's protections include information in the right to dispute a debt and the consumer's response form the consumer could use to take certain actions, including submitting a dispute or requesting original creditor information. You have a right to get all that information. Validation notice, Spanish language disclosures. They're going to have it also provided in Spanish. Validation notice, language access, English validation, the same for English. Okay, and then model validation notice. The proposal would permit a debt collection company to comply with the FDCPA Section 809 and the proposed Section 1006.34's disclosure requirements, Appendix B, by using Model Form B3. So we just went down what debt collectors are going to have to do moving forward in 2022. I think that these rules will make it, I don't want to say it's going to level the playing field, because it's going to be unbalanced, because they're in the business of trying to collect debt. You're in the business of trying to maintain your household. But you should always, when you have debt, you should always do a validation. Well, number one, check to see if it's time barred, aka past statute of limitations to collect. Number two, if it's not past legal statute of limitations to collect or time barred, they're both the same, then you go into the debt validation process. And you just saw right here in the statute that they said that you can get the complete, they said the account number. They did not specify complete, but we always ask for complete. See, that's a little gray area that they left, where they gave us something and they gave them something. They said account number. You want the complete account number. Most debt collectors cannot get the complete account number. That would stop the process right away, but you got to be active on them when you do the debt validation, asking for all of that information. Also, what they had stated in the rules is that they cannot just say that the debt added up to this. They got to show you proof of how the debt added up to that. That's part of the validation process. Now, they're going to fight. They're going to just try to send you stuff. They're going to just try to say, hey, this is the debt. They're going to try to push it to the limit, but you have to stand there, and you have to fight and keep making them prove everything that you have a right to make them prove. All right, if you need help with your credit, please visit us at the Sorry about that. I accidentally pushed the button. If you need help with your credit, please visit us at thecreditrepairshop.com. Watch the video, What Makes Us Different? And you'll see my 8-point validation credit repair process. That's the way that we do it, and that has a part of what debt collection is all about in there. We use the laws to get debt collections taken off your credit reports with that validation process and statute limitations. The other thing is, if you need your credit reports and scores, please go to the website the number 3scores.com. Links are below this video. Get your credit reports. That's going to give you the ammunition to be able to fight back against debt collectors. Next thing is, if you have debt collectors coming after you and you need my cease and desist collection activities letter or my statute of limitations letter or my debt validation letter, those 3 letters are for free and they're below this video. This is Stephen A. Williams, president and founder of thecreditrepairshop.com. Thank you for your time.